You're watching the JJ Podcast.
Our guest this week is Evelyn Reeves, an American pro-life activist and ex-leftist whose story is sparking debate across the US. From politics to personal conviction, she shares how and why her perspectives have changed from being extreme left to a now proud conservative. Evelyn is passionate about encouraging political debate that is respectful yet firm and says we don't have to agree with each other on everything. Getting out of our algorithm bubble is not only healthy, it's vital.
Well, Evelyn, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. This is nighttime for you, so we do really appreciate you jumping on. You've got 2 young children, and in this time that we've been following you, that is something that we have seen, that you're married with your 2 young boys. But one thing that really stood out for us was the fact that you were homeschooled and raised in a large conservative Christian household, but that you, as you were a teenager, you were pulled more so to the left-leaning side of politics. Talk us through your upbringing and what it was like, first of all, to be homeschooled and how you ended up moving over to that side of the ideological views of politics.
Yeah, sure. So I actually became homeschooled when I was in 3rd grade. That's when my mom pulled me out of public school, and she decided to homeschool all of us. At that time, we only had 5 children, only, I say. But they adopted 5 more children. So it eventually grew to a huge family. Being homeschooled was wonderful. I absolutely adored it. I was able to work at my own pace. I was able to get school done in, 3 hours instead of 8 hours in a classroom. A lot of my school was more focused on life skills than academic stuff. I mean, I still did all the academic stuff too, but I was able to really focus on things that I cared about. So I absolutely loved being homeschooled. And then because we were homeschooled and we didn't have that social interaction at school, and we also moved out to the country, we had a little farm, I wasn't getting a whole lot of socialization. So my parents made a really asserted effort to make sure that we got social interaction by sending us to homeschool co-ops in our area or youth groups at different churches that we went to. And that's a lot of where I got this leftist indoctrinated started, at least where I was exposed to these ideas. Some people don't really understand that the Christian conservative spaces aren't always safe for your children. These ideas are everywhere. And especially in the West, progressive Christianity has kind of taken over. So it was kind of viewed as cool and rebellious to be against the authorities in the church. And, you're in a cool little club of like alternative minded people. And so just trying to be a kid and trying to fit in and trying to be seen as a good person, it's almost inevitable that a lot of times you'll just go with whatever is popular. So that's what started it, when I was pretty young, 13, 14, 15, was just me slowly being indoctrinated by the Christian conservative groups that I was in.
Can I just quickly ask before we move on, but what was it that led to your mum pulling you out of the public schools originally? Was it anything to do with what you were being taught in schools and she was then trying to lean you into a different direction?
I don't know if it was that as much as my brother, he's my younger brother, he's 2 years younger than me, and he had just started going to kindergarten. And bless his heart, he's a sensitive soul. And he would be just distraught every time that she would drop him off and pick him up. And she also noticed that I think my older sister was struggling in school, and she just felt like pulling us out would be beneficial for all of us, for my brother to be home with her where he was clearly more comfortable, and so that she could control what we were learning. We jumped right into a Christian curriculum too. So we had the Bible involved in a lot of our schooling. So I think it was a multitude of things, but a lot of what set it off was my brother being so distraught going to school every day.
I just want to add, it's really interesting that you mentioned that the youth group and the Christian youth group, it might be safe, physically, or they might think it's safe mentally, spiritually, I don't know. But there's a lot of confusion surrounding that, because I would say even here in Australia, in Sydney, at my local church, I've definitely experienced that the ones who are often leading and running these youth groups are usually volunteers that are young adults in their 20s or early 30s. And in my experience, they're definitely the left-leaning ones. So there's definitely been some concern from my own husband about what we expose our son to going to church, which is, I never would have thought that would be, he's more worried about that than he is going to a public school.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's right to be worried about that. It truly has taken over, at least the United States. I'm not totally sure about Australia. I've heard it's very left leaning over there. But definitely in the States, progressive Christianity is huge. It's, in all the mainstream media, music and art and all of that. It's everywhere. If you're a conservative Christian, a lot of times you're looked down upon, you're viewed as, hateful and not really like Jesus and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely, Christian spaces you do have to be careful with because this ideology permeates them too.
And what happened? How did this go down with your parents? So as you started to drift more so to the left-leaning side of politics, as you mentioned, you were early teens at this point. Mm-hmm. Were they starting to notice the indoctrination, or this was something that came about later in life?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of them noticing. I mean, when I was, I think, 16, I went to a pride parade and they weren't super happy about that, but they were not super political at that point. They were definitely conservative and Christian, but they weren't involved, at least not as involved as they are now in politics. So they kind of thought it was weird that my sister and I went, but they didn't stop us. They didn't care a whole lot. They were just, kids are going to be kids, whatever. So I think they kind of knew that I was a little more liberal, a little more left-leaning, but they didn't see it as a huge red flag at that point. This was in 2015, 2016, 2017. It wasn't until I moved out of the house at freshly 18, a couple months after my birthday, where the leftist indoctrination really got to me because I had more freedom. I was able to explore the world more. I was able to make more friend groups outside of the home and outside of my Christian circles even. And that's when I think they started to notice a lot more of the psychosis, honestly, is what it was. I was posting all over social media. I was angry all the time. I had, outbursts towards them, fighting with them, nitpicking everything they did. So I think they kind of started to step back at that point. And it definitely caused, a rift in our family for sure. We had been super tight knit before that. And, because of my own actions, I take full accountability for it. They stepped back because they didn't want to make me upset. And so, yeah, it definitely caused a bit of a trial for them and for me at that point.
You mentioned something interesting. I wasn't sure whether or not we'd touch on it today, the word liberal. So when you say that you know how it is in the States, but you don't necessarily know how it is in Australia. So it's completely backwards here because we would be considered two liberal women because the conservative, the Conservative Party in Australia, in a two-party preferred system, we have the Labor Party, who are on the left. It follows the UK. And then we have the Liberal Party, which in the UK was called the Conservative Party. But here it's called Liberal.
That's so interesting.
And even our colours are reversed. So over there, your right side is red. Our right side is blue.
Yeah, but yeah, liberal and leftist are similar. I would say liberal here is definitely more, it's definitely on like the Democrat, the left side, but it's less extreme than leftists. Leftists are the crazy psychosis people. Liberals are, more generally, they tend to be more even-keeled and open-minded and stuff. They're still more progressive in their views usually, but they're not as extreme and crazy as leftists over here.
Now you're still young at 24. So where did it start to shift in your mindset where you were drifting more so away from that leftist narrative?
Yeah, it was in early 2021 when I found out that I was pregnant with my son, my first son. He's going to be 4 in a couple weeks, actually. He's growing so fast. But, becoming pregnant, I was super pro-choice at the time. So I knew that I had a very big decision to make. And, one of the things that started to pull me out of being pro-choice and being on the leftist side was noticing I was pregnant and realizing that I had to kind of reconnect with my mom because, I was 20 years old. You're kind of scared. I was dating the father, but we weren't married. We weren't, we didn't have stable jobs. We didn't have a stable life. So going back to my mom was definitely one thing that started to kind of push me away from it just by her asking me questions, coming to the first ultrasound appointment with me at 11 weeks and seeing that my son was indeed a little human, not just a clump of cells, not just a worthless piece of tissue. That really started to get me to question my beliefs and if what I believed could actually be true, if I really believed it. So that was definitely like all of 2021 was just a huge awakening for me, and thing after thing kept happening. We were coming out of COVID and lockdowns, and that made me even crazier and leftist when that stuff was happening. So just kind of coming out of that and realizing the corruption in the world and talking to my parents again really started to open my eyes to the craziness that I had been entrapped in.
I watched a video with you. You were speaking with a gentleman. I can't think what his name was, but it was one thing that I thought was really interesting.
Kyle.
So is it Kyle?
Was it Kyle? Yeah.
Yes. So I watched a video with you too. And what I found really interesting was that you said that your parents would get you to watch videos, in particular around Trump. So if you would say something and they would say, well, hang on a second, actually, why don't you watch
the
this
full
clip
form
and see that, exactly, and watch actually what's happened as a way to also shift the sometimes often very biased or one-sided story that can be out in the media. If you then go and question it and look at the full version yourself, also started to make you think that, oh, hang on a second, actually maybe my parents are right. Like it was, and I just found that really interesting how you told that story.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that they did many times when they would have me over for dinner, or if I was just hanging out with them on some random day, and we'd eventually start talking about politics. And they would, I'd make a claim like, oh, Donald Trump just, wants all this money for himself and he's just this crazy oligarch. And my dad specifically, he's very political, more so than my mom was. And he would just say, actually, Donald Trump donated his entire salary the entire time that he was president. He didn't make a single dollar off of being president. And I was like, that's not true. Like, you're lying to me. I looked it up and it was true. So, having to sit there in front of my own dad and say I was wrong was very humbling part, especially someone, my dad, I had yelled at him before about this politics stuff. So yeah, there were little moments like that all the time where I would make an outrageous claim and they would just very gently shove a phone in my face and say, that's not what actually happened. And yeah, slowly but surely it started to just break down that indoctrination. And I had to just stop believing it at some point. You can only go through so many facts before your brain kind of melts and you're like, oh, great. Well, I was wrong about everything.
Yeah. You mentioned twice now that your parents, you've just mentioned your dad more specifically, but that your parents were not political, certainly not the way they are now. That is definitely a trend I think we're seeing in the Western world, maybe not even the Western world, around the world. It's in the Middle East where the divide is getting greater. I think algorithms and the internet, things are very polarizing. And we've seen in the last month or two what's been going on with Charlie Kirk's assassination, and even in the lead up to that, there's now a push where people are saying we may not have been interested in politics before, but we can't be silent any longer. This is impacting us, our family, our community, our nation, the next generation, us as mums, especially mums of boys. My boys are real little boys, and I think it shocked me raising boys because I thought in the media had made me think that we socially engineer them to be masculine. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm not socially engineering this, but he's just choosing trucks and dinosaurs and balls. And I would let him have an option to play with whatever toys he wanted.
Just like the, choosing toys even, because with my son, it wasn't necessarily an experiment, but he's on the spectrum. He has autism. And so he's interested in weird things a lot of the time. And one thing he loves is faces. Like he has little people and he loves to make them talk to each other and stuff. And so I was thinking, well, let's just see if he'll like a doll, like a baby doll or something, because he loves faces. And I remember going through the store and he actually grabbed like this princess Barbie doll or something. And I was like, whatever, I'll get it for him. He likes it. Well, he came home and he had the Barbie doll in one hand and he saw his animals, barns, and trucks, and he threw the Barbie doll and went for the trucks. And I was like, if that doesn't say something, he's just naturally wants to be more destructive and more, I don't know how you would say it, more masculine, I guess, with toys. So yeah, I definitely think that whole we socially engineer children, I don't think that that's all the way true.
You would be the best place to talk about how to get the messaging across. One thing that I think America's the same as here in Australia, where we have lost the ability to have a healthy debate in that if you try and have a differing opinion to those on the left, you'll end up being called names, or in terms of your social media accounts will be shut down so that you can be silenced from having a differing opinion. What's your view on how we can start having those respectful conversations again, where debate is allowed and you are allowed to have a different opinion without being attacked or shut down in the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just to continue doing it. That's what I've built at least my TikTok platform on, is going live and talking specifically about abortion. I do some gender ideology stuff too, but it's mostly about abortion. And you will still always get people coming up and screaming at you and, calling you horrible names and everything. But there are normal people. You can reach normal people. And I think, I've gotten messages personally from people who say, I admire how you have your debates. I admire that you're respectful. I admire that you're, firm in your beliefs and you tell people when they're wrong, but you don't, scream and harass them and name call. And so it's really our target audience is the silent majority, the people who don't really, maybe they're not super political, but we're trying to reach them and show them that at least we are trying to have this conversation, because what that does is it pushes those people who might be in the center, maybe not very political, to favor us more than they favor the psychos. And then that can start to foster a more healthy debate where maybe these normal people actually do have contentions with what conservatives believe. And then from there, if we're having healthy debates, I think leftists might start to catch on and say, hey, there's this group of people over here who don't really agree with each other, but they seem to be able to talk to each other. And us just going around assassinating people doesn't seem to be working anymore. So maybe we should start talking. I think, you can't force people to talk. And right now, sadly, a lot of people don't want to. But I think the only thing we can do is just continue talking, never stop talking, never be silent, continue pushing. And I think one day we will see a better America, a better Australia, a better United Kingdom if we just continue doing this.
And is that what you would recommend to parents who see what happened in the case of your family, when you do see your child going off into a direction that perhaps you don't necessarily agree with, but when it's your child, you almost kind of want to say, yeah, go do you, I suppose. And is that the recommendation, just to keep having those discussions with them, keep, in your case, maybe showing them the facts?
Yeah, for sure. I think you should always keep the lines of communication open, especially with your teenagers, your, young adult children who are going out into the world and experiencing these things. And something that you can do to equip them, if they are raised in a conservative Christian family, is don't shelter them while they're raising up too much. I mean, obviously shelter them from actual dangers, but don't be so sheltering that they don't get any exposure to anything and that they feel like they're just being told what to think. I say this all the time.
And then we become dictators ourselves.
Yeah. So if a child is being raised, your intentions might be good to raise them with God and to raise them with conservative values. But if that's all you do, then when they get out of the house and they're experiencing liberal values, leftist values, and their social groups are so heavy with that ideology, all they've learned is accept the opinions of those authorities around you. And so when the authorities change, then they're going to accept the opinions of the new authorities that are around them. So you have to teach them how to think through things, give them pieces of media as they're growing up, and let them read it and let them give you their own thoughts. If they say this seems bad or this seems good, ask them why. Teach them how to critically think. That's one thing that is a reason why I was able to come back to the light, was because my father specifically instilled logical reasoning in me. And once you do that, all throughout your life, you raise your child with logic, it kind of becomes like this nagging voice in your head. And I talked about this too, where I had to keep pushing that back a lot of the time that I was a leftist. So eventually that nagging voice of this doesn't make sense and I'm not, thinking through this correctly will become so loud that they can't reject it anymore. So yeah, definitely teach your children how to think through things and how to do proper research and not just to fall for clickbait on either side of this political spectrum.
One of the things you said recently that I told Jamie I was really impressed with, it's exactly on the line of what you're speaking to now, is that you had come across an app or a search engine called FreeSpoke. And I love that you had said in a reel that I watched that you wanted to make sure you are not only consuming sources that agree with you.
Yes.
And that's a hard thing to say and a hard thing to actually do, because it's human instinct, right? That we want to be right. We want to be validated. I don't want to listen to things that don't agree with me. I love listening to things that can validate my thoughts. But we need to practice what we preach. And we can't say that the left are crazy and they're indoctrinated by the left if we then lean on the right and say we're only indoctrinated by the right. So I think it's so important to put into practice the critical thinking and the logical thinking and the opening ourselves up to other sources of information and having a logical conversation and debate around that.
Yeah, that's something that I actually kind of fell into when I first switched to the right. You know, I went from super far left to falling down all of the conspiracy theory rabbit holes with the right. And not saying all of them are wrong, but a lot of them are improbable. But I was very, very far down the rabbit holes and all the conspiracies and everything and believing every one of them because I was doing just that. I was only consuming right-leaning media. I was only consuming conspiracy media. I wasn't fact-checking anything I was looking into. So there was a period when I came back to conservatism where I was almost as crazy as I was on the left. I was just saying different things. So something that I really, really love to do is I put on YouTube streams or YouTube debates even of people who are very left-leaning. And I either watch them discuss with someone who's more conservative, or I just watch their streams on their own channels where they're not talking to anyone, but they're talking about a specific issue. One of the people, he's really crazy, but I watched Destiny for a very long time. And I was trying to watch his videos and be able to fact check what he was saying, be able to make sure that I could think through what he was saying and find if I disagree and where I disagree. And that's something that I really like to do now is specifically go into left-leaning spaces and hear what they have to say, because they don't do that for us at all. They don't try to understand what we believe. And I want to be that kind of person that says, hey, I really disagree with you, but I don't think that you're a horrible monster. And I understand that you are probably coming from a place of kindness and compassion. It's just being really misconstrued and it's not based in logic and reasoning and facts. So I want to give them the courtesy that they don't give to us.
Well said. There's a few that have flipped. Obviously, yourself, you're out there openly admitting to being an ex-leftist and now a conservative. And there's a few I've started following. Obviously, you've got Chloe Cole, who's the de-transitioner. Yes. And I think there's one, that Kendall or something. He's a guy, I think he's gay and he was a real leftist and he's moved over. And even you mentioned one recently who had, she was a leftist who put out a video about Charlie Kirk having empathy. Hannah Brown, that's it.
Yes.
And it's amazing how the reaction on the right is not the same as the reaction on the left. So it's a lovely reminder for us in what we do to constantly have compassion and understanding even when we are being attacked, and we do get attacked.
Oh yeah, I mean the amount of death threats that I've gotten over my past 4 years of converting is crazy. It is insane. I mean, these people are horrible to me, but I know that I'm not that person anymore. I was, but I'm not that person anymore. So I either ignore them, block them, or sometimes if I'm feeling really charitable, I'll say, God loves you and I love you and I hope you get better. And then I leave it at that.
I love it.
So what's your ultimate mission, Evelyn? Like, you are 24, incredibly well-spoken. You do so well out there. What's your ultimate mission in the political space?
Yeah, my biggest mission is saving unborn children. I talk about this all the time. It's like I said, what I built my TikTok platform on. I think because one of the reasons that I switched from leftist to conservative was being pregnant with my first child, I think that really struck a chord with me and I really grasped onto that. So I actually started my own nonprofit called Pro-Life Advocacy Network with one of my friends. And our entire mission is to educate and, empower pro-life voices to make sure that they're equipped with good information and to be able to change hearts and minds of pro-choice people. Because, we can't get legislation passed if we don't have the votes, if we don't have people who agree with us. So that's my biggest mission, my life's mission. What I want my life's work to reflect is fighting for unborn children and giving them the right to live and stop them being slaughtered in the womb.
We're probably I'm just noticing time, so we'll probably wrap up relatively soon. But I just have a question. I don't know if Jamie has another question, but I just wanted to ask, I was watching a program the other night here in Australia, and it had on it a speech from an ex-left Prime Minister. It was Bob Hawke. It was on the Tony Abbott documentary that we're watching. And when he delivered this speech, my husband and I said, oh, if that speech was delivered today, you'd think he was conservative. Like, it sounded like, for us, a liberal speech. Our liberal, not your liberal.
Yeah.
Right. And then I was thinking about, Democratic presidents. And where do you think the left really lost their way? Like, I think the left of old is not the left of now.
No, it's not.
And it just seems so much more extreme. Like, and it's happened in a short period of time. Like, our left leaders in the 80s and 90s would be really disappointed with the left of today. We've got here the founder of the Greens Party, which is left of left, because we've got a preferential system with multiple minor parties. The very founders of the left Greens Party are now deserting that party.
Well, they were expelled.
Because it's become pro-Palestine and trans rights activists and angry in the street. It used to just be about protecting animals and the environment.
Yeah, no, I've seen that trend a lot. I'm very young, so I don't really know a lot about, 90s, early 2000s. I barely remember the election of Barack Obama even. But I think, obviously the internet is forever. I can watch all these videos, and even, what the US is dealing with illegal immigration. You watch old videos of Barack Obama, of Joe Biden, of Hillary Clinton, and they are saying the exact same thing that Donald Trump is saying, and they would enforce the exact same laws as he's enforcing now. I think where it all went wrong was probably around 2015 or 16, at least in America, when Donald Trump was elected for the first time. I think a lot of things went wrong in the Obama era, and with the introduction of social media and everyone flocking to those sites, and then, the algorithm showing you what you wanted to see and clips being taken out of context. I mean, it all snowballed. And then when Donald Trump was elected and everyone was screaming that we were going to be in The Handmaid's Tale or whatever that was, that just made people go insane to the point where they don't align with what I call, classical liberal, which is kind of your hippies of the 70s and 80s, where they're all, no war and save the earth and that kind of stuff, which is stuff that I think most people can agree on. I don't think anyone likes war. I think we want to do what we can for the planet and the environment. I think we think that humans have equal rights, but they've gotten it so twisted now where people are jumping ship. I mean, in our last election here in the States, every single state and every single county shifted right in some way. We had like a huge shift right with especially young males. They're just sick of this. They're sick of the crazy stuff happening. And I think social media has really contributed to a lot of it. And it probably started when Donald Trump, who was a Democrat for basically all of his life, was elected in 2016. That's when stuff really started going crazy.
Well, Evelyn, thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate it. And keep up all the good work that you're doing overseas. And no doubt we'll start seeing it trickling out here in Australia as well.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to the JJ Podcast.